Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is a privilege to rise to pay tribute to the life and legacy of Canada's 18th Prime Minister, the Right Honourable Brian Mulroney. And at the outset, I would like to extend my condolences to his wife, Mila, his children, grandchildren, and the entire Mulroney family. Although I did not have the privilege of personally knowing Brian Mulroney, I've always admired and appreciated his tremendous statesmanship and leadership that he provided during the 9 years that he served as our Prime Minister. In order to understand the many achievements and accomplishments of Brian Mulroney, it's important to understand that when he was elected in 1984 with the second largest majority government in Canadian history, save for John Diefenbaker's landslide win in 1958, he inherited very difficult circumstances, difficult economic circumstances with double-digit inflation, double-digit unemployment, interest rates that were north of 20%, as well as a difficult fiscal situation with the fiscal cupboard being bare. And notwithstanding those challenges, he got to work to implement many bold policies, some of which were controversial, many of which were transformational, and with the benefit of history, have proven to have been for the benefit of Canada on the whole. And it should be further noted that when Brian Mulroney was first elected, the unity of the country was very much imperiled. There was great division across the land. It was Brian Mulroney who spoke about bringing Quebec back into the constitutional fold with honor and enthusiasm. And although he, in the end, didn't succeed, he must be credited for the tremendous leadership that he demonstrated and the courage that he demonstrated at considerable political cost to himself and to his party, but for the betterment of strengthening the unity of Canada. That was his objective, and he brought Canadians together. He brought Albertans and Quebecers together in 1984 and again in 1988 when he made history being the only Conservative to win a back-to-back majority government, save for Sir John A. Macdonald. When Brian Mulroney was elected in 1984, speaking as an Alberta MP, Alberta was reeling. Alberta had been devastated as a result of the National Energy Program that had devastated Alberta's economy, that had driven many Albertans to unemployment and bankruptcy. Brian Mulroney recognized the difficulty that Alberta faced, and his government moved expeditiously in difficult circumstances to abolish the National Energy Program, as well as the Petroleum Gas Revenue Tax, the PGRT, which was a punitive tax. But it wasn't just in the context of energy policy that Alberta benefited from Brian Mulroney. His government abolished the Foreign Investment Review Agency, a board whose decisions often imperiled the flow of investment to Alberta and the West. And Brian Mulroney negotiated the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement, which was a win for Canada, but which was very much in Alberta's economic interests, and indeed free trade continues to be in Alberta's economic interests. So while Brian Mulroney was not always popular in Alberta, he demonstrated, and history has demonstrated, rather, that Brian Mulroney consistently had Albertans' backs and delivered for Alberta. And while much has been spoken this evening about some of his obvious, important achievements, including negotiating the Canada-US Free Trade Agreement, the Acid Rain Treaty with the United States, standing up to apartheid, strengthening our most important bilateral relationship, that being with the United States. There are other areas that he deserves great credit for that he often hasn't received credit for. One example is that it was the Mulroney government that restored fiscal responsibility to Ottawa. When Brian Mulroney was elected, he inherited a deficit that, in today's terms, would be approaching $100 billion. And that's even a large deficit by this Liberal government standards. They've exceeded deficits on that scale, but I digress. The Mulroney government faced a bloated federal government, program spending that was being increased on an unsustainable basis annually. Sound familiar? The Mulroney government responded by initiating policies to reduce the size and scope of government, to get spending under control, indeed on an incremental and responsible but significant basis. Annual program spending growth was substantially reduced in the neighborhood of 70%. And consequently, what was a very large operating deficit turned into an operating surplus. In short, the Mulroney government fixed Canada's budget. And it's true that Jean Chrétien did inherit a deficit from the Mulroney government, but it was because of the costs associated with servicing that debt, debt that had been accumulated by the previous Trudeau government, not the Conservative Mulroney government. And of course, Brian Mulroney's government deserves significant credit for contributing in a major way to building Canada's modern economy through the policy of free trade, yes, but also through a series of free market policies, including a comprehensive program around privatization, deregulation, and tax reform. Together, these policies contributed over the long term to growth and prosperity and to the enhancement of Canada's competitiveness. And I could go on with a long list of many other achievements of Brian Mulroney and his government over 9 years, but time does not allow. But I think what these achievements that I've highlighted, that my colleagues have highlighted over this evening demonstrates is that Brian Mulroney was a transformative Prime Minister. He was a consequential Prime Minister. He will go down as one of Canada's greatest Prime Ministers, and Canada is better off because of his leadership. Thank you, Madam Speaker.